It's the Blues Rock Show with Pete Francis and Willie Witten.
Welcome to the Blues Rock Show. Pete Francis alongside Willie Witten. Today, our special guest, Chris Antonik, who just released a new album called Morningstar. Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, guys, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you bet. So tell us about coming up with the title Morningstar.
The title of Morningstar, it's funny, it was a very last minute decision. Originally, the record was going to be called Community. It's not something that I've really talked to a lot of folks about, but why not start now? Given some of the themes on the record. But then I wanted to, come up with something a little more sort of modern, futuristic, and just a little more interesting. And Morningstar comes from a line in Thoreau, his Walden piece, where he says, "The sun is but a morning star." Basically just, it's about me sort of finding mindfulness and trying to appreciate the moment and starting a new chapter in my life, sort of heightened awareness, new beginnings. And I thought it was a cool title. And also it kind of signifies, something bright and fresh, so I thought it just encapsulated some of the future looking sounds on the record, as well as some of the traditional stuff going on,
You mentioned modern as the title. The sound of the album itself, looking at some of your previous work, it has a more modern feel. It moves a bit from more of your blues rock meat and potatoes to a lot of different sounds and some different genres. Yeah. Was that done intentionally, or is that just part of sort of your evolution?
I think it's funny. I mean, I have all sorts of influences as a music fan. Obviously, blues guitar is the place where I the sandbox I play in. But just as most people, no matter what genre they're in, usually people like all sorts of music. And I've just always wanted to take the opportunity when I'm in the studio, as opposed to when we're live, just to kind of have fun and paint with all sorts of colors that are available. And with the pandemic, we had so much extra time. So if something wasn't working, like the song "How to Be Alone," for example, started out as a real meat and potatoes live off the floor blues tune. And my producer was like, "Let's go future funk." I don't even know what that was. And he's like, "Let's put, we got this old Lynn drum machine, which was made famous by Prince." He started doing all these drum beats and added a bass. And I'm like, "Let's take the drums out and let's do that." And I trust him, like, let's just go with it. It was just so much fun. And as a songwriter, I love playing within the blues. As a guitarist, I love playing within the blues structures, but there's so much else that I want to say. I couldn't tell a story like the song about my son, Little Man, for example, say in some sort of hard blues rock sort of thing. But I want to get those messages out on the record, and I just want to get them all in one place. So I think the variety is something that I do strive for,
Yeah, and Chris, you have some pretty notable guests on this album. How did those appearances come about?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I guess Jerika Singleton, who's on Waves of Stone, I had met him years ago down in Memphis at the International Blues Challenge, and we just sort of kept in touch. And I always was just blown away by his playing, and I was like, let's try and let's see what he's doing. And he was available, and he just blew me away. He sent the solo back, and I was just like, obviously we were in the same room together. He's down in Mississippi. I'm up in Toronto, and there's a pandemic, so there's not going to be any getting in the same place. But I picked him because I knew him a little bit, and his playing was just perfect for the type of sound we were going for on that, because he's got a kind of a meaty rock edge to what he does as well. Mike Madison from Tedeschi Trucks, very lucky there. That's a friend of he's a friend of one of my songwriting partners, Ben Fisher from England. I've been writing with Ben for about 10 years. And Ben's got some co-writes on this record, and it's purely coincidence that Ben knows Mike. And Mike actually played on my second record in 2013, and I asked him again, and graciously did it. So there's a little bit of pulling favors, but it's really just approaching people honestly and hoping they'll do it. And I guess the other guest is Paul Delaurier, who's a Canadian blues guitar player from Montreal, and he's now living in the States. We're old friends from up here in the Canadian scene, and yeah, and he's such a great guy and a good friend. And I was like, and with Paul, I wanted to get a traditional sounding sort of old school blues guitar solo, on the one really traditional song on the record. So there's a reason for the choosing of these folks. It's not just the sort of, hey, let's get a fancy guest star. There's actually some, reason.
Strategic
Yeah.
decision making. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's fun. It's cool. Very lucky.
Did this all come together at once, or was this spread over a longer duration? Because you mentioned Little Man. I also think of later on the album, The Promise of Airfields. That's a far ways different than your opening singles on the album, which have a lot more cutting edge. Did they all come at once, or was this sort of done over a longer period of time or through the pandemic?
It's sort of a two-part answer to that. The short answer is they were all written at the same time. They were all written within the same period, knowing that 12, 13, what have you. There were a few more, but they didn't cut it. We tried them, but they weren't working. I had the idea of a 14-piece story that had a variety of sounds. So on the one day I'm working on Waves of Stone that I wrote with a guitar player here in Toronto named Dan McKinnon. I think you may have done some reviews of his records in the past, but we have. Yeah, he's got this really edgy blues rock sound, and I was like, I want to do one of those. So maybe I'm not going to get there all on my own. Who can I co-write with? And then I look up, and I called Dan, and we got together and we did this thing, and that's why that one sounds the way it does. So it's almost like I'm trying to create different characters within the record. And sometimes I know that I may need someone else to come in the room with me to help get to that point, and then it's fun to just try playing in all those sandboxes. So, but they were all written at the same time. We did all the basic bed tracks and all at the same time too, roughly at the same time. But then, we kept going in and out of lockdowns. This was in the summer of 2020. This was a while ago. And then shutdowns and, my kids with online schooling and just trying to manage the pandemic. There was a lot, and it took us a lot to finish the work. But I didn't want to rush the solos. I didn't want to rush the vocals, given all the other stuff going on in my life. So I just said, you know what, we're spacing this out, and we're going to do a crowdfund in the meantime. And we're going to try and get some label support, which ended up getting from Moondog Music, which is a new label out Western Canada that's partnered up with me for this. So it was about not wanting to rush it and taking the opportunity of, unfortunately, it took a pandemic to take that time, but I think that we benefited from spacing out how they ultimately sounded, even if they were all written at the same time and for the most part recorded within the same, most of the parts were done at the same time. But all the sounds and some of the overdubs and the ideas later, they came later. And that's the fun part for me, because when you get on stage, that's, I can't afford to take an 8-piece, 12-piece band on stage. That's not the league I'm operating in. Maybe one day, hopefully. But so the studio project and the live project, they're totally different things to me. And I like that. I like that I can play in different areas,
Yeah, Chris, one of my favorite tracks from this album is Pilgrim, which is sort of a nod to Eric Clapton. Can you talk about the creative process behind that song?
Yeah, that was really cool. I was doing, at the time when I was writing these songs, they were all written before the pandemic. So sort of late 19 into spring of 20. And I was doing a lot of reading about, sort of what it means to be, what becomes more important as you enter midlife. I'm 47 now. I guess I was 44 or 40, whatever, 45. But the idea that we're all connected and that, being in a community is more important than, say, chasing status or all the things you may have been, obsessed with when you're younger. And I was like, that is a great idea for a song. And, I felt like a pilgrim. I was just starting a new life. I was trying to spread out in my community and trying to keep connections for myself and for my kids as a new single father, and just trying to, keep a community going. I felt like a pilgrim. That's where the word comes from. Creatively, I came up with that riff, that opening riff, and it was kind of a Keith Richardsy kind of thing. And I love those chords because it's like a D minor 7, but you don't play, you kind of hit it on and off, and then you go to a full chord at the B and the C. And it's really fun to play. I don't play in open tuning. That's a standard tuning piece. But I sent it over to my partner, Ben Fisher, my songwriting partner, and he added a few bits, and then we started getting into the lyrics, and then he sent back a bunch of lyrics, and we co-wrote that one together based on the idea that, we thought it was a really strong idea. And, originally we're going to do it a little bit bluesier. We're going to do it a little slower. And then my producer, Derek Downham, convinced me, let's do this one faster. Let's try something different. Let's go for another, like a poppier kind of sound. I was like, sure, like I love those late 80s kind of Clapton sounds. I love the Journeyman record, and obviously we're not, not Eric Clapton, but that we tried to play in that area, you know what I mean? With the synthesizers and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's one of my favorite ones on the record too. That I like that one. It was fun to make.
Yeah, I would say overall, this is a very contemporary blues rock album. Kind of looking at blues rock today, who are some artists that are really grabbing your attention right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's the big ones that are always, sort of, there's your heroes of yours, like Gary Clark and Tedeschi Trucks and Doyle Bramhall. And then of course, there's all sorts of new acts coming up, like, that are making some great music, like GA20 and, Robert John and the Wreck, and, of course, Bonamassa, obviously the big one. But I'm really, I don't know. I like all those acts. I like, I'm a big fan of Doyle Bramhall. I mean,
Sure.
As a writer, and I really admire how he's still, a guitar hero, but he's also a really sensitive songwriter, and he can come out and do a piano ballad or come, and I was like, you know what, I want to try doing like stuff like that. I don't just want to play blues solos. I love playing blues, that's my thing, but I wanted to broaden out. So I guess people like that are the ones that influence me as a writer, and as a player, obviously, there's so many great players, like Marcus King. Like there's so much blues going on, right? Like blues rock and modern blues rock. It's really amazing how, I think, robust and vibrant the scene is. And you guys, the kind of music that you focused on and cover is just, this scene is so cool right now. It's just like, and it's funny because it's not any different than what people were doing in the 60s, right? Or 70s, where it's just,
right,
uses the bass. Here's some creative output based on blues, and it sounds like X, and that's kind of, it's just blues rock, blues influenced stuff, and it's always going to be really, I think, robust and rich when it's coming from blues, and then throwing other stuff in the pot. So there's so many. We were fortunate enough to get at it on the Spotify modern blues rock playlist, and Back to the Good. And I just going through that, there's so many other acts I haven't heard of. And I'm just like, wow, who's this? Go take a listen to that. Like there's so many acts out there doing such great work. I think it's a really cool time for this genre.
So you mentioned Spotify just now. Spotify, CDs, vinyl, all these different mediums. Do you still think CDs, vinyl has had a resurgence, but do you think CDs still are worth releasing? And in general, we all know that streaming is taking a big cut out of artists' pockets.
Yeah.
What are some of the margins? Where do you find your best margins on the business side of things? And maybe that's even in merchandising.
Yeah. I guess the short answer is playing live and getting paid to play live. Spotify and Apple, that's great, but they're not, the numbers are nothing to write home about. It's the CDs I make in this genre. I like to send out a package. Like obviously a lot goes out digital, but the CD to me is, I couldn't afford to do vinyl right now as a small independent. That maybe next year we'll do a vinyl. That'll be a double album, by the way. So God knows how much that's going to cost me. So there's another thing to think about, but that would be fun though, isn't it? Yeah, the CDs I like to send out because in the blues radio world, especially in the States, my radio tracker, Frank Rozak, he's sending out 400 CDs. And that's how it's getting on the radio. So the CDs still serve a really important role for the radio folks. So we still make some, and we sell them at shows, of course. But streaming's nothing to write home about, that's for sure. But playing live is obviously the main thing. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting with this genre specifically. There are a lot of people that still go to shows and buy CDs, which is much different from other forms of music.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's great. I mean, I think that. I mean, I've been asked this question as well, and I don't want to say anything, controversial or anything, but I don't like the fact that my album gets compressed on Spotify, and you spend all this money and you record on these incredible vintage analog consoles, and then it comes out of your computer speakers at this little crushed little mouse squeak sometimes. And
I think the thing is though, Chris, the average listener doesn't realize that. Someone who's really into the music or someone like you're going to notice it, but the average person on the street, they're not going to notice the difference.
And that's an interesting point, because you think back to when you were a kid listening to, say, the radio or something. You'd be listening to AM radio or FM radio
and the quality is much worse, but you didn't know that back then.
You didn't know that. Yeah. So, I guess the messages are still getting out there. As long as people are connecting with the music. I'm just an audiophile. So I'm like, I can't even listen to I won't even listen to it on Spotify. I got to have it on in my house, or my car. Car is a fun place.
So do you consume your music mostly? Where do you maybe discover your music through Spotify, but then go ahead and get something where you can throw into a high level disc player or throw onto a turntable and get the full experience? How do you consume when you have the time?
I guess it's a bit of both. I do, I also do a lot of vinyl shopping here in Toronto. I try, but not knocking Spotify. I mean, it's a great place to get music into people's ears. It's just, I guess it's just a mixture, and that's just the way it's got to be now. And that's okay, because 10 years from now, it'll be something else. So I think that it's at the heart of it. I think it's great that there's just so many acts in 2022 making, such rootsy, soulful, blues-based music. I think that's really, really rich. And I think I'm really happy to be part of the scene right now. It's a really cool time. It's really nice. So as long as the music's good, I think we can get around these other things,
Yeah, well, Chris, it's been great having you on the show. Before we let you go, any final thoughts? Anything you want to add?
No, I want to thank you guys for having me on the show, and I really appreciate that the record connected with you guys. Because I know, we worked really hard on it, and people like the sounds of it, and that's really flattering. But I think a lot of folks are getting the messages behind the songs, and that really touches me and means a lot. So I really appreciate it.
Totally. You want to tell people to go listen to it on Spotify?
Right. Please go listen to it at your local vinyl store in Dolby Atmos. No. It's Chris Antonik, Morningstar. Go listen to it on Spotify or Apple Music.
And you can even go ahead and do something crazy like buy a CD of Chris Antonik's.
Right.
Support the music you love.
Yes, or you can go to Bandcamp and purchase a copy of Morningstar.
There you go. All right, Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show today. We do appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right, that's Chris Antonik. I'm Pete Francis alongside Willie Witten. This is the Blues Rock Show. We'll see you next time.